The worst ways ancient civilizations died out. Let's begin with those civilizations that vanished without a trace, and move onwards until we reach the most flamboyantly self-destructive civilizations ever. Number 10. The Norse Greenland colony. In 985, a group of Vikings checked out Iceland and decided that it was just too cold and miserable there, and proceeded to sail westward to establish their colony in Greenland. Wonders of wonders, it worked for a few hundred years due to the fact that the climate was a bit warmer and the settlers were able to rear cattle and sheep like they did in Scandinavia. More ice and less pollution. However, following this, the climate began to cool during the period termed Little Ice Age, and the Norse Greenlanders dealt with changes in circumstances like most people, by remaining completely passive. They wouldn't follow the Inuit hunting and clothing ways that proved to be useful for their neighbors, as if accepting the wisdom of those who had already found the solution would be too humiliating for them. The animals died of hunger, crops got frozen, and supplies from the European ports became less frequent, which is what we do not want, especially when our livelihood relies on these supplies. By the 15th century, the settlement completely disappeared, leaving no records of final years of life there at all. Just a few bones with traces of malnutrition and lots of empty homes. Number 9. The Indus Valley Civilization. At its height, the Indus Valley Civilization was one of the most advanced civilizations in the world, boasting cities that had urban planning, sewage systems, and standardized weights and measures, still better than some current-day cities. In the height of its glory, there were over 5 million people living in present-day Pakistan and northwest India. Going strong, it was a great civilization that soon collapsed. While historians argue about what really led to its extinction, it amounts to saying that no one really knows. The most probable cause lies in the change in monsoon pattern that caused rivers the civilization relied on for its agriculture to dry up and disappear. As crops were not able to yield any crops anymore, big cities started to be abandoned, gradually disappearing through time. Some researchers also suggest that tectonic activity may have rerouted the Gagarhakra River, turning once fertile farmland into a dry riverbed almost instantly. Number 8. The Minoans. The Minoans constructed the first sophisticated society in Europe, with its epicenter on the island of Crete, with its grand multi-story buildings, plumbing systems, and paintings depicting people having fun jumping over furious bulls, showing just how much risk-taking the population was prepared for. But approximately at 1600 BC, the neighboring island of Thera experienced a powerful volcanic eruption, which was one of the largest ones in history. In fact, the eruption didn't destroy the Minoans outrightly, since Crete was far from the main eruption point. However, it did trigger a tsunami that crashed into the shores of Crete and destroyed almost all harbors, ships, and coastal cities in a matter of hours. Additionally, volcanic ashes from the eruption spread to the farmlands of the region, which caused impotence of crops for many years. As their navy was destroyed and food supplies were limited, the Minoans became easy prey for Mycenaeans, who unexpectedly invaded them to fulfill the mission that was started by the volcano. So the moral of this story is that if your whole economy is based on the sea, do not build it nearby a volcano. Number 7. The Mycenaeans. When it comes to the Mycenaeans, we can only conclude that their reward for overcoming the Minoans was their own collapse a few centuries later, in such a mystery that historians refer to as the Greek Dark Ages. One day, the palaces were flourishing centers of writing and trade, and the next day, archaeological layers show massive destruction in almost every part of the region, all situated almost at the same time. The most commonly accepted theory suggests the invasion of a wave of people referred to as the Sea Peoples, who also destroyed many other civilizations approximately at that time, even though nobody has ever been able to ascertain their identity. Coupled with issues like severe drought, earthquakes, and ruined trade activities across the whole eastern Mediterranean, this phenomenon resulted in what historians refer to as the Bronze Age collapse, a series of catastrophes that resulted in the collapse of several advanced civilizations within a couple of decades. Even the writing was completely lost. The Mycenaean linear B script simply vanished and was not used for many centuries. Number 6. The Maya. The classic Maya civilization is characterized by some of the very famous stone cities throughout the ancient world, with the estimated number of people in the millions within today's boundaries of Mexico and Central America. However, in between the periods from the 8th to 10th centuries CE, almost all the famous cities had been abandoned in a very short period of time, which is a unique way of concluding the common project. Data regarding tree rings and lake sediments suggest that there had been a number of enormous and powerful drafts that took place for a considerable amount of time over a territory that was already overpopulated. If your livelihood is based on the water resources supply and the rainfall does not occur at all, it slows down the development of humankind. Deforestation caused by various construction works and unreasonable use of ecological resources likely caused the drafts to be worse than it could have been. Another point of interest is that warfare among city-states reached its peak throughout the considered time frame, given the fact that the latter is the sign of any rationality being lost. Some of the populations of the northern Yucatan had survived and adjusted to the new conditions, which is the reason of the existence of the descendants of the Maya throughout the centuries. However, the time of the great civilization had come to an end. Number 5. Easter Island. Most of us know Rapa Nui as Easter Island, which is home to almost 900 gigantic statues named Moai that were built by the civilization that may have reached approximately 15,000 people on a territory as big as a small city. It is worth mentioning that it is a remarkable population figure for a tiny, isolated piece of land located in the middle of the ocean and having very few resources. According to traditional explanations that have appeared in many documentaries for ages, population of the island cut down all trees to create monuments for clans, which led to ecological disaster and famine, wars, and cannibalism among islanders. This is a good morality play given its horrifying nature, but recent studies show that the events were not as extraordinary and even more depressing. Invasive rats brought by settlers presumably destroyed the native palm tree population by eating seeds, which could mean that contamination took place even if no statues were created. However, deforestation indeed took place, soil and other resources were eroded, and population decreased significantly before Europeans arrived. With the arrival of Europeans into the area in the 18th century, smallpox was introduced among other things, which decreased the population with more than 90% of people. Therefore, the story has two unfortunate conclusions. Number 4. The Akkadian Empire. The Akkadian Empire is thought to be the first powerful entity in the Mesopotamian region, combining together the two peoples living there, Sumerians and Akkadians, under the common ruler, about 4,334 years BC. The territory was extensive and the governmental system was efficient, but about a century later, it stopped existing completely. The core samples obtained from that area show that right at the time of collapse, a dramatic drought occurred that transformed the country into a desert and resulted in a famine over mammoth territories. Because of famine, all the northern regions of the empire were completely abandoned, while refugees, suffering from hunger, moved en masse to the southern regions of the empire, thus increasing the load on the food supplies available. The empire fell apart into various smaller kingdoms just a few generations later, demonstrating that one of the main dangers for the civilization in ancient times was sometimes not the enemy army, but rather the nature that had decided to stop being kind to people. Number 3. Western Roman Empire. To begin, there are many books written to discuss various reasons for the fall of Rome, which we will not include. However, here are the most important points. The Western Roman Empire had been plagued with currency problems due to excessive minting, as well as the employment of foreign mercenaries in the army during the 5th century. Furthermore, emperors were being murdered by their empire guards at an incredible rate. The Germanic tribes fled from the Huns and invaded Rome, even before the empire could prepare its armies and negotiate with or fight against these newcomers. In 410 AD, Visigoths plundered Rome, a city that had not been invaded for 800 years, which meant they had lost their home match without even making an effort to change the players on the team for many years. And finally, in 476 AD, some Germanic general relieved the last emperor of his duties. No one bothered to appoint a new emperor, however, as the old position was losing its importance and remained empty. Meanwhile, the Eastern Empire rebranded itself and lived for another 1,000 years. Number 2. The Khmer Empire. The Khmer Empire is known to have constructed Angkor, which is recognized as the largest urban complex of pre-industrial times. With an advanced water management regime, Angkor could serve as a settlement of nearly 1 million people centered on Angkor Wat. Without a doubt, the most significant engineering achievement of humanity. From what we see today, it appears that the water management system was one of the reasons for Angkor's decline. More specifically, based on Treering data, it has been shown that the region experienced years of extreme climate variety, which began with long-lasting droughts followed by complicated rainy seasons, all within the generational time frame. Since the canals and reservoirs were designed for a more stable climate, their susceptible infrastructure appears not to survive the severe climate changes. Extreme climate conditions were, of course, combined with military attacks from Ayutthaya and the changes in trade routes that led to an increasing use of coastal ports rather than inland capitals. The city was gradually abandoned through the years, and the jungle did the work afterward, covering the temples and waiting for adventurers to find them back. Number 1. The Bronze Age collapse, all at once. Earlier we have talked about the Mycenaean collapse, dated back to 1200 BCE. This destruction has a truly horrifying aspect, because while Mycenaeans were being destroyed, surrounding civilizations also disappeared. Thus, only a few decades later, the Hittite Empire, one of the strongest military powers of the prehistoric Near East, shattered into pieces. Moreover, the Egyptian New Kingdom suffered from raids without regaining its former power. Finally, different city-states on the Levant were burnt and never reconstructed. The Bronze Age civilization, which maintained political and trade relations between its parts for centuries, collapsed simultaneously. Experts explain such failure by a combination of some factors acting simultaneously: drought across the eastern Mediterranean, earthquakes, internal revolts of overtaxed citizens, and attacks of the sea peoples that plundered towns. In terms of modern definitions, it was the moment when each system failed at the same time. The climate was so unfriendly that the region entered true dark ages for several centuries, when even literacy rate decreased significantly.